Physics is one of the most exciting subjects to study in high school, as it attempts to explain the working principles of the creation, from the micro level all the way to the macro level. However, when it comes to exams, all this excitement can turn into despair. Many learners find it challenging to even achieve the minimum passing threshold of 30%. Imagine how difficult it is to attain a distinction. In this video, we will learn some tips that can assist us in at least reaching the minimum passing mark in the NSC physics paper. The good part of the story is that most of these tips will also be helpful for learners aiming for a strong A. First, we will look at some statistics from past papers, which will serve us as a guide for our exam. Then, we will develop an exam strategy to help us achieve the highest mark possible. Without further ado, let's start with the first section. It is not important how challenging a physics paper is. There are always marks allocated for definitions, free body diagrams, and formulas. In this part of the video, we will learn how to make the most of it by examining some statistics that show why obtaining marks for these three components is a relatively easy task. First, let's examine the distribution of definitions, free body diagrams, and formulas in the last 5 exams from 2018 to 2022. In 2018, 21 marks were allocated for definitions, 4 marks for drawing free body diagram, and 17 marks for writing the correct formulas, totaling 42 marks. In 2019, the marks were distributed as follows: 20 marks for definitions, 7 marks for free body diagrams, and 19 marks for formulas, summing up to 46 marks. 2020 was the luckiest year for learners in this regard, but let's not forget about COVID-19. 25 marks for definitions, 5 marks for free body diagrams, and 22 marks for formulas, totaling 52 marks, more than 1/3 of the entire exam mark. In 2021, 21 marks were allocated for definitions, and there was only one free body diagram question with 4 marks allocated for it. Another 21 marks were given for the correct formulas. Finally, in 2022, 18 marks were allocated for definitions, 10 marks for free body diagrams, as there were 2 questions asking to draw these diagrams, and a total of 15 marks were allocated for formulas, adding up to 43 marks. On average, almost 46 marks were allocated for these 3 question types. 46 marks out of 150 make up 31%. In other words, without even solving any questions, just by memorizing the definitions, drawing free body diagrams, and writing the formulas, you can pass the physics exam. On the screen, we can see the list of all the definitions that can be asked in an NSC physics paper. You can find the link to this file in the description section below. Memorizing these definitions shouldn't be a big issue if it guarantees us passing the exam. Yet, not all of these definitions have the same weight. Some of them were never asked in the last 9 years. Therefore, in the description, you can find another document that contains the list of the definitions asked in the past 9 years. In the worst case scenario, you can study just these ones. While drawing free body diagrams, it is important to note that the marks allocated for these questions give us a clue about the number of forces acting on the object. For example, we have to draw 5 forces if the question is for 5 marks. You can get more information about drawing free body diagrams by clicking on the video link in the top right of the screen. Now, let's talk about the formulas. How do we know which formula to write to get a mark for it? The good side is that in an NSC physics exam, the order of the question topics almost never changes. You can see the topic distributions for the past years on the screen. One of the exceptions is in the year 2018, when there were 2 questions related to electric circuits instead of 1. But the order of the topics remained the same. The other two exceptions are in the years 2017 and 2015, which contain two questions about electrostatics. The order of the topics yet again remained untouched. How can knowing this order serve us in the exam? On the screen, we can see the formula table from the 2022 November paper. As you can see, the formulas are divided according to certain topics. The formulas in the motion section are used to solve the vertical projectile motion questions. The fourth section is used for loss of motion and impulse momentum questions. The next section is used for work and energy. The top part of waves, sound, and light is used for the Doppler effect, and the bottom part is used for the photoelectric effect. The headings of the rest of the topics are self-explanatory. For each question in the exam, we first identify the topic of the question, then write down which quantities have been provided or given in the question, as well as which quantity is required to calculate. Then we decide on the formula that combines all these quantities. It is also worth mentioning that there are some key formulas for each topic that can be used to solve almost every related question. You can see most important ones on the screen. Don't forget that these are just the key formulas. It doesn't mean you will get a mark if you write them for each related question, but there is a big possibility of it being true. After writing these formulas, try to do substitutions even if you don't know what you are doing, because sometimes just writing the formulas without substitution is not enough. However, if your formula is correct, even if your substitution is wrong, you will still get a mark. Now that we have covered the statistics, let's look at the strategy to use in the exam. The exam is out of 150 marks and can be completed in 3 hours. There is no difference in the weighting of these marks, which brings us to the concept of easy, medium, and difficult questions. Usually, the marks allocated for a question also determines its level of difficulty. 1-mark questions are generally the questions where the answers are very simple and don't involve any calculations or brainstorming on our side. Question 6 of the 2020 November paper is a good example of this. Without much trouble, we can say that the phenomenon illustrated in the graph is the Doppler effect. That the Doppler flow meter is the medical application of this phenomenon in the medical field, and that two frequencies on the graph are directly proportional. Answering these 3 questions didn't take even 1 minute. On the other hand, there are questions consisting of 5 or more marks. Usually, solutions to these questions consist of 2 or more steps and take a few minutes to solve. Sometimes we can waste 10 to 20 minutes on a 6-mark question, and at the end we just give up. The worst part is that we didn't just waste our time. Now we are also demotivated, and as the end of the exam approaches, we rush to solve the rest of the questions. As we don't have time to read the questions properly, we end up solving them wrong. So, what is the solution? The solution is the reading time. If we use it properly, reading time can help us a lot. Instead of using it to find out if there are any mistakes or not, or to figure out what kind of questions are in the exam, we can use it to decide which questions we are going to solve first. What most learners don't know is that the order in which we solve the questions doesn't matter. We can start and end with any question we want. During reading time, we can mentally decide which questions are easy and which of them we can solve without any trouble. On the other side, we can decide on questions we are going to leave to the end of the exam as they are challenging for us. Let's consider the 2022 November paper. While walking through the questions, we can mentally decide on easy, mid-level, and difficult questions. During this process, we can mistakenly skip some easy questions or assume that some of the difficult ones are easy. It's not a problem, we can make corrections later. The total of easy marks is 45, and most probably the maximum time we will spend on these 45 marks is not more than 30 minutes. Think about it again. 45 marks in just 30 minutes. In other words, we have solved almost one-third of the questions in half an hour. And there is still 2.5 hours left for the remaining two-thirds. Knowing this will boost our confidence while approaching the rest of the questions. As you noticed, while reading the paper, we marked all 5 or more marked questions and the ones which are very long as difficult questions. And it makes only 30 marks. Most probably, we were going to waste more than 75 minutes while solving these questions. Let's compare these two values once more. 45 marks for 30 minutes and 30 marks for 75 minutes. If these difficult questions are positioned at the beginning of the exam paper and we start solving them before the easy questions that come later in the paper, we are just wasting our time and energy. Therefore, once we are done with the easy questions, we can now go through the mid-level questions. Even in this part, we try to start with the questions that seem easier compared to others. If a question somehow seems a bit difficult to solve, we will skip it and move to the next one and come back before we try to solve the difficult questions. Even if it takes us 90 minutes to finish the second section, we still have 1 hour left for the difficult questions totaling to 30 marks. We can summarize everything in 3 steps. First one, focus on the definitions, free body diagrams, and formulas first, as they make up one-third of the questions. 2. Utilize the reading time to identify the question levels as easy, medium, or difficult. 3. Start the exam by solving the easy questions first, then continue with the medium level ones, and approach the difficult ones only after the others are done. All the best and good luck to all of you in the upcoming exams.